have to say. I'm Ronnie on BBC Radio Sheffield. We've been hearing this morning we're 4 months away from the most fundamental reform of British policing in a century. In November we go to the polls, if we do, to elect a police and crime commissioner in South Yorkshire and another one in Derbyshire. There'll be one individual who'll decide how the police spends its budget. They'll hold the chief constables to account. It costs £3 million in our region to run the elections. So far, only 2 parties in South Yorkshire and Derbyshire have selected their candidates. Alan Charles is the Labour candidate in Derbyshire. Simon Spencer is the Conservative candidate. And as far as we know, Liberal Democrats and indeed no other party have yet selected a candidate. Thank you both for coming in, Mr. Charles and Mr. Spencer. My opening question really is, do you yourself want a police and crime commissioner? Simon Spencer.
Well, good morning, Rolly. I'm a great advocate of this policy, and I think it brings a new level of accountability to policing across the country. They'll have a unique democratic mandate to tackle crime in their areas, hold the police constable to account, engage with the public, set local priorities, agree a local strategic plan, and, of course, where necessary, dismiss the chief constable.
Alan Charles, you're the Labour man for this. Are you in favour of the change?
I think Labour have got to contest these elections, and I think it's essential that we have Labour police and crime commissioners in the country.
But do you welcome the change?
With the change itself, I think this demonstrated again just how much David Cameron is out of touch with the country, where there's overwhelming opposition to police and crime commissioners. At the moment, the system of police authorities is working extremely well. In Derbyshire itself, there's been 9 consecutive years of falling crime rates and increase in detection. It is working. This election itself, as you said in your introduction, Ronnie, is going to cost £1 million in Derbyshire alone. Now that will put around 33 police officers on the streets of Derbyshire for 12 months. At a time when the government are cutting police officers' pay, police staff pay, increasing their pensions, I think you have to question very, very seriously, is this the right policy at this time?
So you want the job, but you don't want the job to exist. You want the job and you think the job's a good one. That's the summary of our situations.
Yes and no to that, but I think now that we are where we are, and the government have forced this policy through Parliament, it did have to be forced through. There was an awful lot of resistance to it in the House of Lords particularly. We are where we are. We cannot abandon our communities, and we want to make sure they're protected.
If you win it, Mr. Charles, what will you do?
What will I do? I will work very closely with the Chief Constable, as I do now. I have 3 years' experience as the Vice Chair of the Derbyshire Police Authority. I know how policing works in Derbyshire. I know the senior ACPO officers. I work very closely with them. What I will do is continue to listen to what people in Derbyshire say. There's well-established ways now of consulting with people. It's called the Have You Say events, which we do on the streets of Derbyshire. Last year we spoke face-to-face to over 7,000 Derbyshire residents to see what's important to them in police and crime world. We also hold every year a risk and threat seminar with professional agencies and voluntary groups, and from that I would formulate the policing plan for Derbyshire for the next 4 years.
How would you do the job, should you get it, Mr. Spencer?
Well, I think what we have to say, Rolly, people don't understand what the police authority does to date, and I think that's the challenge in these debates that we're having this morning. If you ask the general public out there who runs the police authorities or what is the police authority, I think the challenge will be to say, well, there are 17 members in Derbyshire. I would challenge anybody who wasn't a member of that authority to name those 17 unless they had a list in front of them. I would also suggest to them they're not quite sure what those police authority members do. In this case, following the election of the Police and Crime Commissioner, there will be a person who is accountable to the public.
And if it is Simon Spencer, and if we do all know your name, what will you do differently?
Well, what we've got to do is engage with the public, as we already do, and there's no doubt about it, the police authority in Derbyshire have done that.
I wonder what's going to be different then.
Well, there is going to be an awful lot of different things, because what this role will mean is that the public have a person they can go to and charged with the responsibility.
But I can't see a difference between your views, you two, at the moment about what you will do.
The difference is that if that person does not do and perform the job correctly, that person can be thrown out by the public 4 years later. At the moment, that does not exist. You do not. We appoint the members to the police authority. They are not elected to the police authority directly. They are not accountable to the public. And also, the new Police and Crime Commissioner will hold the Chief Constable to account at a level that has never been seen in the past. Now, that isn't about denigrating the the good work that police officers do on a day-to-day basis. That is about making sure that the police policies and the police strategic plan is shaped around the public need. And I don't believe at the moment that is done as well as it can be.
We'll come back to it if I may. I've got a caller joining us in our conversation. If you'd like to put these headphones on, I've got Robert joining us from Netheredge. You can join us, folks. I'm on 0114 279 6699 81333 if you want to text. You'll have to be quick, but it is very interesting, this. Robert joins us from Netheredge. What's your thoughts on it, Robert?
Good morning, Ronnie, and your listeners. Basically, I'm concerned about the police authority's current position as to their lack of accountability, and that is one concern. But there's a fundamental flaw in policing, which is that the police officer is not required to examine why he's lost a case. Just because the Crown Prosecution Service have taken over, they seem to have absolved the police of any need to improve the quality of policing. And this is something that the police authority can't influence, and neither, because it's not required in statute or regulation. It's a fundamental flaw of trying to run a business without looking how you can make it better.
Robert, thank you very much. I'll bring these two in on that topic, but we must move on to the bigger ones. Alan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think just with the Crown Prosecution Service, it's not an issue of using them to negate the police from doing the job properly. What does happen, if the police want to bring a charge against somebody, they discuss and consult with the Crown Prosecution Service on what evidence they need, and if they need further evidence, we will go and get that. If I can just come back, you asked what's the difference between me and Simon Spencer in this. One big thing for myself is I will keep policing public. I will not be privatising the police services in Derbyshire like the government are trying to force authorities to do all around the country. We get into the debacle that we've seen last week with G4S, who are currently running police services in Lincolnshire. It makes me shudder to think what sort of state we could get into here, and I think that's going to be a very big difference.
Thank you. Do you want to answer Robert first of all, Mr Spencer? And then
level of accountability is what this programme is all about, and I mean, the new Police and Crime Commissioners will bring a new level of accountability to this process, and I do believe that with that mandate we can tackle the issues. Obviously, ACPO have already said on numerous occasions the statistics that are put forward on a regular basis. There is arguments whether those statistics are giving a true reflection of what the public...
Right, let me ask you the bigger question, which I think might be the political divide between Labour and Conservative in the Derbyshire election, from the sound of it. Where do you stand on the privatising of parts of the police system, Mr Spencer? Where do you stand on G4S and the Lincolnshire?
Well, I'm not going to talk about Lincolnshire or G4S to be...
Oh, you're not? Would you like to talk about the actual... what is the big political issue, and everyone knows it is, the division between the parties? Do you believe in privatising part of the police?
What we should be looking at is better ways of utilising public resources.
Is that yes?
What I would say to you all is this: we're looking at better ways of utilising public resources, and the way we achieve that...
Does that mean privatising parts of it?
That may well mean changing the way in which some services are delivered. Now,
but does that mean privatising it?
Privatising part of some of the services that are delivered in Derbyshire may be part of that agenda, but what I would say to you is this: at the moment we need to look at ways of outsourcing, we need to look at the ways in which resources are used, we need to work in collaboration with all of the police authorities across the country, we need to tackle crime in different ways, and we need to look at ways in which we can be more efficient. It is a fact of life that resources are diminishing, and it's only right and proper that the police carry their fair share of that burden, which they have to do.
So your manifesto will be to go in, cut the amount of money spent on the police and privatising part of it, and yours will be to take a job you don't believe in and keeping things as they are.
Please don't put words in my mouth. I never said that whatsoever. I'm sure Alan didn't.
I'm sure I'm causing great difficulty, but will you answer my question then? What is the difference between the two parties?
The difference between... I actually do believe that some of the policies that have been put in place by the police authorities have been highly successful, but there are things that need to be looked at carefully. And that's the way in which the resources of the police authority or the police force are managed. There are probably about 4,000 people involved in this process. 1,500 of those are back office staff, as you might say, civilian people who do work on behalf of the police authority at this moment in time. There are different ways in which that work can be done, more efficient ways, more effective ways, and the public would expect every pound to be spent effectively and efficiently, and that's what I will do.
Let me ask Alan Charles, have we spotted a difference between the two parties in Derbyshire on this issue?
Certainly, but just let me nail this issue about a job that I don't believe in. I do believe in the job now that it's fair, Ronnie. It's fair, we've got to deal with what we've got. I do believe believe in it, and I will make it work for the people of Derbyshire. Just on this difference, it's very clear. Simon's just said there should be further cuts in policing budgets. He's a supporter of that. I'm most certainly, neither will any other Labour PCC, be a cheerleader for the 20% cuts this government has brought in. With civilian staff, I value every single member of staff working for the Derbyshire Police Service, whether they're a warranted officer or they're a member of a support staff. No police officer can do his or her job without that support mechanism there. They do a fantastic job. Just let me finish this, if I may. Just on efficiencies, of course there's got to be efficiencies. If G4S or Capita say there's a profit to be made here, then why should we give it to a private company and their shareholders?
Right,
why don't we make
I am
that
going to interrupt because I've got two more questions. I must put these two. I'm running out of time. If I can't ask, I'll only get a chance to ask one. And there are two very important questions I want to put to you. We shall certainly come back to this topic before November, before we make this crucial decision. One of the questions I have to ask you is, do you think anyone will bother to vote in this election? The Unison have suggested it will be 7%, which is no mandate at all. We've had a discussion this morning. I don't know whether anyone will want to vote, can understand what they're voting about. Do you think anyone will bother to vote in this one, Alan?
I think it's very, very important that people do take part in this election now that it's going to happen. It is extremely poor planning to have an election in the middle of November. It should be happening in May. If it was going to be postponed, it should have been postponed to next May, when elections are normally held and people are more likely to come out. What I would plead with everybody who's listening to this programme is please get a postal vote and use that postal vote to cast your vote in this. If you don't vote, if we don't get a Labour PCC in Derbyshire and South Yorkshire, you'll be left to people like Simon, who will be outsourcing, privatising and cutting police budgets.
Do you think anyone will vote, Simon Spencer?
Well, what I would say to you, Rolly, I appreciate what you're doing this morning and highlighting this issue, and I hope all the radio stations across the country start doing the same over the coming weeks. But it is an important election, there's no doubt about that, and if the people of Derbyshire wish to have a police and crime commissioner who is concerned about their views, wants to make sure that policing is shaped around their wishes and needs, I will do that. And I'm not prepared to accept what Alan's just said, that I'm going to be cutting the way in which funding is delivered to the police.
We will resume that debate.
And can I also say, to say there's been 20% cuts in police funding is totally incorrect, because there actually has not been 20% cuts in police funding.
I promise you come back to it at a future occasion. I can't wait for that moment. Simon Spencer, my final question to you, and it's the same one to Alan Charles. £75,000 this comes with this job. You're going to take that money for this job?
Well, if I'm going to do the job properly, effectively, and as the people of Derbyshire would expect, £75,000 is a good salary. Let's be quite frank about this. But if you compare it to the cost of the police authority at this moment in time, that's nearly £300,000. There's going to be a huge workload, huge responsibilities, and I would say this.
Alan Charles, are you taking the money?
It's an interesting point. The salary for the job has been evaluated by civil service people on this. Can I take your advice, Ronnie? Should I take it?
I'll ask listeners to tell me. It's a very, very good question. Thank you for that one. I will put that question to our listeners. Thank you both for coming in early on Monday morning and beginning this really most important debate here on BBC Radio Sheffield. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.